Hello, and welcome to Breast Cancer Conversations, a podcast brought to you by survivingbreastcancer.org. I am Laura Carfing, breast cancer survivor and founder of survivingbreastcancer.org, a nonprofit organization providing community, education, and resources to empower those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers from day one and beyond. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Breast Cancer Conversations. I am so glad that you are here. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I'm so glad you found us as a resource. If you're an avid listener, thank you every week for tuning in and checking out our content. I would also love to give a huge shout out to our friends at GE Healthcare. They have been huge supporters of survivingbreastcancer.org and the work that we do here on the podcast Breast Cancer Conversations. So a sincere thank you, and so much gratitude for making all of this possible. Have you ever wondered what the difference is between a nurse navigator and a patient navigator? I know for me, I use the terms interchangeably and didn't actually realize there was a significant difference. Today, we dive into the topic and shed light onto the important role that these navigators play in the field of oncology. I am joined by a stellar panel. Both Colleen Beguin and Amanda Kuller are from Honor Health, and we have a patient advocate from survivingbreastcancer.org, Lourdes, Heras, joining us today. Colleen and Amanda explain the critical functions of nurse navigators, from providing patient education on chemotherapy and symptom management to offering emotional support and ensuring patients have access to the necessary resources. We discuss the emotional and psychological challenges we as patients face, particularly around identity, body image, and the concept of survivorship. Welcome to the conversation.
Yeah, my name is Colleen Beguin, and I work for Honor Health as a lead nurse navigator and have been serving in this role since 2018. Before that, I was working as an oncology nurse in the acute setting in the hospital at Del Webb Hospital in Sun City West. And before that, I was at Abrazo in the medical surgical trauma floor and did some labor and delivery as well. That's my nursing background. And as a nurse navigator in the lead position, I get to basically help everybody. So if something's going on and one of the navigators needs some assistance or resources, I'll jump in and I can help them. If we are short of coverage and we need somebody to cover, then I'm the number one cover person. So I'm always covering a clinic. And so I get to go sometimes to not only Shea, where Amanda's way out in Shea, I get to go to Gilbert, to Chandler. I get to go to Avondale, Surprise, North Scottsdale, Biltmore, Tempe. We've got clinics across the valley. Honor Health has been serving the valley population for patients across the board from all types of services, not only oncology and cancer care, but Honor Health is well renowned for the level of patient care that we give.
Amanda, would you like to introduce yourself? Both of you are from Honor Health out in Arizona. But how you got into the field, a little bit about your background.
Of course. So my name is Amanda Kuller. I have been a nurse for 9 years. My background is primarily actually in ER and trauma care. And I came into the oncology navigation role about a year and a half ago out of a want to be more involved in patient education. In the ER, it's very snappy and to the point, and you get very little time with patients. Whereas in our oncology role, the way we have it set up at Honor Health, it's very education intense with our patients. And that is something that I really wanted more of and quite enjoy. And like Colleen said, I am the navigator for one of our clinics. I do have one oncologist that is very specialized in breast cancer, but we do treat everything across the board as far as oncology here.
Lourdes, you wear many hats here at survivingbreastcancer.org. Can I turn things over to you to introduce yourself?
So I'm based out of Arizona, and I had the privilege of meeting Colleen in a meeting at Honor Health. I am a patient of Honor Health myself, and I think I provided some resources at one of their meetings. So as a patient, I think for me, it was crucial for me to provide resources available that I found useful through my diagnosis, because a lot of the times when I ask questions from my own providers, most of the times I would say, more often than not, they would say, oh, I don't know about this, or I don't know about that. And for me, I have this mentality of, if there's a problem, there's a solution for it. So let me go ahead and find the solution, share it. I share the wealth, because if you keep it, it does you no good for other people. So for me, it's like, share the wealth, share the knowledge, and provide those resources to those that need it. So
just hearing that story, Lourdes, it sounds like almost your diagnosis has propelled you into breast cancer advocacy and sharing resources for people. How do you define nurse navigation? What is a nurse navigator? Colleen, as the lead nurse navigator, can I kick that over to you?
At Honor Health, we do have our navigation team separated from nurse navigation and patient navigation. And you had mentioned, well, is it that way across the board, or is that something unique? It is something that is more unique to Honor Health in the way that this is set up. A lot of the other systems will have one person as a nurse navigator doing things that we would have our patient navigators doing. And then, so the way that our system is set up is the nurse navigator will provide all the education about chemotherapy, immunotherapy, what to expect, who to call, where to call, when to call, if something's going on like a symptom. And then the nurse navigator is going to answer those patient calls that are calling in with problems with chemotherapy treatment, such as possible diarrhea, possible nausea. Are they able to drink their water? Are they having a skin rash? Is there something going on? So our goal there is to treat these symptoms that pop up when they're little so that they don't become a big problem. I'll give you for example. Let's say that a patient is having nausea, but they didn't pick up their nausea medicine from the pharmacy, and they're not aware that they really need the water. And so they're drinking maybe a bottle of the water, Arrowhead or Asant, whatever, 16-ounce water. We want them to drink 64 ounces of water. And the importance for that is because it protects their kidneys from the effects of the chemotherapy and the immunotherapy. Because all of these chemicals get washed through the body and out, most of them through the kidneys and out through the urine. And so if they're not drinking enough water, then the chemicals tend to sit in the body, and then the patient will become very tired. They'll become dehydrated. And that's one of the leading reasons that patients on chemotherapy will go to the hospital, is because they can't become dehydrated. And it can be life-threatening if they're not drinking enough water. And so just even that basic education piece of, this is really important for you. This is why. If it's not working, if these tools that we're giving you to put in your tool belt are not working, well, then you're going to call the nurse, the registered nurse symptom management line, and we're going to find something else to make it work better. So if this nausea medicine isn't working for you, we're going to find a different one. If you need to come in for IV fluids to keep you hydrated, well, then we're going to make you an appointment and bring you in for IV fluids. And so the nurse navigator is pivotal and essential in helping the patient going through chemotherapy succeed through chemotherapy to the best that they can. Our patient navigators, that separation, the patient navigator is not clinical. They can't talk about nausea. They can't talk about any kind of medical diagnosis or problem that the patient is having. They are essential because if the patient maybe doesn't have enough money for groceries that day, they can get in touch with our social work team, get them connected for those social determinants of health to help address things like housing, transportation. Do they have air conditioning? Is the utilities on? Are the utilities on? Where can we address those barriers to care? Because if somebody is not having enough money to eat, they're not going to want to come in for treatment, and they may not do as well through treatment. We don't want our patients losing weight through treatment. It's been documented that if somebody going through chemotherapy loses too much weight, they won't succeed as well through chemotherapy. So all of these things play in together. And by the nurse navigator and the patient navigator coming together, we form that whole wheel for the patient holistically to take care of their needs. And I found it to be amazing. And I've looked at other systems in the Valley and across the country. And the system that we have at Honor Health to address so many different patient needs, I believe it's world class.
That's amazing. Thank you, Colleen, for that explanation. And I had no idea that those were two separate roles. I think for the lay woman over here who uses these terms interchangeably, right? Whether it's, a patient navigator or a nurse navigator, I think for us, it's like someone's just helping me navigate, but to understand that difference in the clinical approach that one takes or does not take is really important. And so my question also, maybe Amanda, when you're seeing patients, do you introduce yourself as the nurse navigator, as the RN, as the patient navigator? We have so many people looking at our case, and then I just say that we are collecting all of these great experts to put in our back pocket. So when we have an issue, we know who to call. But a lot of times too, you're so overwhelmed with a cancer diagnosis. I actually don't distinguish between the social worker, the RN that's coming in, the person that's taking my blood pressure. I mean, I definitely know who my oncologist is, but then everyone else on the team that is supporting the work of the oncologist, is like, just give me your card and your number. Who do I need to contact for what? So tell me a little bit about when you're meeting a patient, what is your approach like?
Yeah, so I always introduce myself as the nurse navigator. And usually when I'm meeting a patient for the first time, it's because we're doing our chemo counseling or our big chemo education. And I offer that as both a telephone visit or in person. It's up to the patient how they want to do it, what would be the best method for them. And usually it's such a big thing that we're doing. And it kind of also becomes an intimate conversation in many ways too, that by the end of it, they do recognize that I am the nurse navigator. And then I point out all the different ways our other team members help them. So my patient navigator, I tell them, you're going to contact her if you need medical equipment, if we need to talk about referrals out to other agencies. If we need the social worker, this is what the social worker is going to do. And I always I don't have to upsell our team because our team is really amazing, but you always, try to put in some extra adjectives. So our social worker, I literally think she's a gift from the heavens. And our oncology dietitian, she's absolutely amazing and one of the best in her field. So kind of setting patients up for understanding just how stacked their team is going to be with us. That's kind of also part of my job to make sure that they understand that they're going to be well taken care of by myself. And sometimes if I'm the only person they can remember, that's fine. I think a lot of people do. If they can only remember two people in their care, it's going to be the oncologist and the nurse. And then if I have to pivot them away from someone else, I'm like, oh, I actually can't help you with that, but this very amazing person, I'm going to get them involved right away.
Hearing the word cancer, everything stops. And I was just working towards tell me what I have to do. I had neoadjuvant chemotherapy. They were very much can you come in the next week or so? We got to do the port placement. We got to get you started on very aggressive chemotherapy right away. And I didn't have a chance to really process. This is hindsight, but I didn't have a chance to process that they were telling me that they had this team of people that could help me. I remember them talking about, you might want to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or you might want to see these people, the social worker, these different resources. But it was almost like they were sharing the words and the information with me, but I wasn't able to accept and process what they were telling me because I was so hung up on what is chemo and what does that mean? And I have cancer. So just, I think hearing it again and again and again to say remember, you have a nutritionist at your disposal. You're going to have taste bud changes. You're going to go through all of these changes through the chemotherapy side effects, but there's a team of people that are here to help you navigate all of those side effects. And so I think just what you were saying about patient age education is critical. And not just the education of, oh, you need to drink more water, like you were mentioning, Colleen, but why is it important to drink water? Someone tells me to drink more water. I'm like, oh, yeah. I got that. I hear that all the time. But am I going to do it? But if you tell me why I need to do it, then I'm like, oh, I definitely don't want to be hospitalized for dehydration. I'm going to make sure I'm getting those 64 ounces. So giving that, rationale. So Lourdes, as someone who was diagnosed with early stage breast cancer, did you immediately have access to a nurse navigator?
So my connection with the nurse navigator began when I was scheduled for surgery. So she called me and let me know of the process, pretty much a general understanding and introduction of herself, of what her purpose was and how she was going to help me navigate through this process, and the diagnosis and treatment, and making sure that I knew what was coming next and how to even clean I remember the ports, not the ports, sorry, the drains. The drains. Yes. So that's one of the things that she did help me through that process and help me understand what her role was and how she was going to be assisting me through that initial process. And I think that's where I did get assistance from that and information on her role. And I think, Laura, I want to second that the importance of understanding why we do or what we need to do certain things is crucial, because that makes us click with why it's important.
Colleen or Amanda, either one of you, if you want to take this next question on what are some of the most common questions or concerns that you're hearing from patients, and how do you console them in a time of such trauma and chaos, if you will?
One of the biggest things is just knowing that they have support. That's one of the very first things that I go over in our chemo counseling is you're going to have me during business hours. I have a direct line. I have voicemail. I'm going to get back to you very quickly if I am on the other line. No worries. And then you have the doctor on call for every other hour of the day, like 24/7. There's a nurse or a doctor, and that's how our program is built. So there's no need to be suffering at home for any reason. So a lot of people get a lot of relief just from that, knowing there's going to be someone medical they can always contact. And then another big question that I don't get so much from my other patients, it kind of comes back to hair and identity. Yes, hair is a very deeply psychological thing that patients go through. And, I want to give that all the attention that it possibly can get. And then I also, with the breast cancer patients, they seem to have a bigger body identity crisis, right? Because with other cancers, you're not having such a big cosmetic change potentially, right? And a lot of women, especially, not trying to single out men in any way, but a lot of the women kind of just have this, well, who am I now? How am I feminine? And just having talks like that, like you can still trust your body and you can still be feminine in your body. Let's talk about the other ways that you can accomplish that and be that. So those are a lot of the conversations that are unique to breast cancer patients.
Lourdes, how does that resonate with you? And has your identity shifted over the course of your diagnosis?
It has. I think that was one of my major, I needed more emotional and psychological support that I could imagine, because for me, it was a little bit of a different, not only cancer was affecting me, but I was going through a intimate violence partner, like intimate violence during my 18 months of marriage. And as soon as I got diagnosed, that partner turned his back on me. So, Amanda, when you say the identity of now a diagnosis, but somebody mentally affecting you, saying you're no longer a woman, they're taking all your woman parts away, that really, really resonates with me. And so that's why one of the reasons why I want to provide that support to women, that they are not alone, and a cancer does not define their womanhood, and body part does not define whether they're a woman or not. And I have learned that myself, because it was hard to swallow when those words were said to me. But at some point, you have to be be that strong person and realize that those words were coming from that person with either bad intentions or whatever, but it's a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge. And so it has shifted my role. I think in terms of the physical appearance. I'm not done with my surgeries. So I always say that I'm yet to have 2 more surgeries. And yes, it does affect you mentally, psychologically, and emotionally. So yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear you too. Like, Lourdes, we say all the time, like, our diagnosis doesn't define us. But then at the same time, it is so who I am as someone who's been diagnosed with cancer. It has drastically changed my life and my appreciation for life, my perspective, my understanding of what's important to me, being diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. So I struggle with, what role am I allowing cancer to play in my life from that nomenclature, right? Like, you're a mom, a sister, an aunt, all of these things, a teacher, like whatever your profession is. And then you're like, oh, I'm also a breast cancer survivor or thriver. You're like, is that something I want to take ownership of or not? So I think that identity piece is really important. And when you choose to tell somebody, I remember, again, Amanda, to your point, like losing your hair, it's very obvious that you're going through chemotherapy. You lose your eyelashes, you lose your eyebrows, you're constantly blowing your nose because you lose the hair in your nose. Like, you look sick. But so it's like, yes, I have cancer. But then once you start getting your hair back, you're going back to work, you're feeling fine, despite all of the hidden side effects that you might be going through hormonal therapies or surgery and reconstruction, et cetera. It's almost like when you meet someone for the first time who hasn't met you pre-diagnosis, do you let them know that you've been diagnosed with breast cancer or not? It's like, hi, my name is Laura. I had breast cancer. Or like, when do you drop the bomb, and et cetera. So, I think that role of identity and when you choose to share that information is really important. But a question I also had, I wanted to kick back over to Colleen. So when it sounds like someone gets access to a nurse navigator early on in their diagnosis and when they're meeting their medical care team, and how long do they have access to that nurse navigator? Does that vary? Hey, my friend, sorry to interrupt the flow of this amazing podcast, but because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I wanted to let you know about our Tell Cancer to Go Take a Hike event. I'm reaching out to you to ask for your support to help us raise these critical funds that we need to continue to provide the emotional wellness classes, support programs, evidence-based education, and this podcast, of course, to support those impacted by breast cancer. Because of amazing donors like yourself, last year we've been able to offer over 400 programs serving 6,000 individuals, 57 webinars focused on medical education and information that attracted over 42,000 views, 133 workshops supporting mental health such as expressive writing, art expression, and meditation, and 142 support groups tailored to those living with early-stage breast cancer, metastatic disease, and inflammatory breast cancer. Help us keep our nonprofit, survivingbreastcancer.org, thriving. Join our October 19th fundraising event, Tell Cancer to Go Take a Hike. You can make a donation, sign up, or create a team. Head on over to survivingbreastcancer.org/take a hike to get started. Your support means the world to us and to the people like you that we serve.
At Honor Health, it's a very open door policy. If a patient calls and they haven't seen the doctor for 3 years and they need to get in to see the doctor and they found a new lump or something was going on, they can talk with us. The nurse navigator will always talk with that person. They don't have to be going through active treatment to talk with us. Our role in education and symptom management, I would say, is probably 80 to 90% of what we do, but we're also available for any patient that may need services to talk with the nurse. And a patient often will be on surveillance, right? So they're taking their AI and they are going along their 5-year plan. They've had their surgery, they're taking their medication, everything is normal. And then suddenly maybe they feel something different, right? They could just call up the front desk and say, I need to schedule an appointment, right? Most of the time, though, I find that our front desk team is fabulous at routing that patient to the nurse navigator so that he or she can talk with them about, well, what is going on? How are you feeling? We can address any concerns that they may have. and then help them get scheduled to see the doctor. Also, after they're done their treatment, they'll move into a survivorship care plan. And in the survivorship care plan, we're looking at, well, what should you do to help yourself feel better as you're recovering? We would all like to think that as soon as chemo is done, that the next day you feel better. It takes a little bit of time. And so that first month, you're still going to be going through the effects of the chemotherapy, and it's still going to be affecting your white blood cells, your red blood cells, your platelets, your hair, your skin. It's still going to be doing that. But then 2 or 3 months later, you might start feeling better. And if you're needing to talk with a nurse to say, is it normal for it to take this long? Or if along the way you start feeling sick, um, the nurse navigator is always available. And a patient navigator can come in and provide services still if there's something going on. They're usually going to be focused on those people who are in active treatment, but they're also available to help if somebody needs something, like maybe they're still having pain, and maybe they wanted to get a marijuana medical card so that they don't have to pay as much tax. Or maybe they need to get a handicap parking sticker. They can still call us. We're never off. We never end. We're always available. Amanda, is that what you've seen? I've never ever turned anybody away. Even our hematology patients who don't have any cancer, if they need something, we're going to be there for them. So
Yeah, no, she's right. We do have patients that are now going into, 10 years on AIs now that, that's coming out and people are extending that treatment plan as long as they're with the oncologist or want to be with our oncologist, then we're kind of a piggyback on that and we will always be available then too.
I like that you said and want to be with our oncologist. I think Lourdes, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we want to be watched as much as possible. We do not want to break up with you guys.
Yeah, no. Yeah, and I'm glad that you guys made that distinction between again our RA navigator and also the patient navigator, because it allows us to understand what role you guys play and what role does the patient navigator play. Because I think for as far as like in my own experience, the emotional and psychological support that I some resources that could be available in terms of emotional support, counseling. How can I involve my family in some of my aftercare, or even my after, because after due to my cancer, not only that mastectomy but a hysterectomy, and you're talking about I have a teenager dealing with someone who's going through menopause, so there's a lot of emotions going through that, but having those resources available, I think is good to know, for us to cope not only with that but anxiety, stress related through our diagnosis, because I think there's a lot of misconception that people see that some people, I didn't had chemotherapy, but I had radiation, and through my experience of radiation, my hair felt like straw, felt really dull, as if it was dead. And so for me, like the emotion of your hair is the physical appearance of you, and it's just like very emotional. And it was very stressful through that process too. So, but I think having those resources available, it's really neat to know that we can go back and say, you know what, let me go ahead and touch base with a patient navigator or an RN navigator and see what resources are available for me. And I'm glad to hear that those are, it's an open door, open door policy. So yes.
I had a similar experience, Lourdes. And, I think the way technology has evolved to give us access to our nurse navigators, I don't think my nurse called herself a nurse navigator, but as I'm hearing how you're describing her role, she was definitely that to me, to the point where I was literally snapping pictures and sending her like photos of like, is this normal? Is this not normal? And just having that level of, like HIPAA aside, I'm like, I don't know if I'm just sending this like to your cell phone or through the portal. I don't know which one it is, but like the fact that there was just like access and to have that peace of mind, because you don't know what's normal. If this looks okay, this is not our day today. I do have 2 follow-up questions. The first, I want to go back to Colleen, what you were mentioning about survivorship. I think in our conversations, at survivingbreastcancer.org, we run support groups every week for all stages of breast cancer, metastatic, inflammatory support groups, also offered in Spanish. And there is no consensus of when survivorship starts, which I think is okay. It's okay not to have a consensus. But how does Honor Health, or how do you define the survivorship care program, right? So you were mentioning, is it when you're done with active treatment? Is it done when you finish your hormonal therapies? Like when does the survivorship plan kick in?
I would say personally, from my opinion, survivorship begins on day 1. We are all survivors, right? It's day 1. Day 1, every day forward is a survivorship. And when you finish treatment, just like Lourdes said, it can be like, oh, please don't take my doctor away. Right, Laura? It's like we don't ever want to be done with being loved and cared for. Right. And so the survivorship care plan talks about that, yes, you're going to come in for continued updates with your doctor. And we want you to pay attention to how much good food you're eating. We want you to let us know if any symptoms are continuing, because there can be what we call sequela, or follow-up problems that occur because of chemotherapy, or like you said, Lourdes, with the radiation. Sometimes the skin doesn't heal as fast, or the hair, like you said. Those things can go on for a while after you're done with active treatment. And the survivorship care plan talks about these are things that you can do to help yourself feel better. Like one of the things that they talk about on OncoLink is where I get a lot of my information for my care plan. They talk about to be gentle with yourself, that energy is kind of like a bowl of candy. And so you're going to take a little bit of a jelly bean, and you're going to have energy that's going to last you a little while. And then you might need a little bit more. So to take good care of yourself, be your own best friend, and reach out when you need something. And the survivorship care plan, it comes in on the outside of the bubble, and it creates that continuity so that you never feel like you're cut off. You know now, what are my next steps? What should I be expecting to be normal? And so we'll provide education on what will be normal. What does normal look like after? What is my new normal going to be? Because one of the things that I find in the survivorship care plan discussion and working through that is that a lady or a man who's gone through breast cancer, you're always wondering, well, what if it comes back? It's like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? And it would be like if you were taken away from your team and you felt like, oh, I don't have a door open to be able to go back in. You feel very lost and lonely. So the survivorship care plan comes in and around that, circles around your treatment, and gives you that holistic feeling that, yes, everybody is here for me and for my success and uh, my movement into the next phase. And what Lourdes has done is what we would call a second act. And it's very healing. It is very therapeutic to give back. And what she's done by creating all the goodness that she has done in her survivorship is bringing so many good things to so many people who are in the middle of just finding out they're diagnosed. And Laura, what you're doing by bringing this podcast, you're going to touch people along every path of their journey, from the very beginning all the way through to the survivorship, where they're done with treatment maybe, and they're maybe just having to take the AI, but you're going to touch so many lives. This is your second act. And so what we found and what evidence has shown, and Medicare has done a lot of studies, and they've shown that having not only navigation, so nurse navigation, patient navigation, it increases the positive outcome through any kind of treatment, whether it's surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, whatever the path is, navigation helps it become better at the other end. And then Medicare has shown that survivorship care plans and that bubble around the treatment, around everything, really makes a difference. It helps you move through and circle back to, well, what can I do now? Where can I make a difference for other people? Because so many people have been good to me along my journey, and how can I give back? So it's like a circle, like there's no end.
I like the visual. I have like the big bubble wrap around me right now.
So. There it is.
It's great to have all of these resources. And I love that there is literature and studies showing the positive impact this has, whether it is the patient staying on their treatment and being compliant with, taking their AI or tamoxifen every single day. I mean, speaking of the mental trauma, like, yes, I want to move on from cancer, but then at the same time, I have this constant reminder that I have to take this pill every single morning for the next 5 to 10 years. Is that constant reminder I can only move so far away without these triggers happening. We talk a lot about, what is triggering to us and then how we can respond to those triggers. But we also talked about, and you mentioned these social determinants of health and the role that the patient navigator plays. Amanda, can we dive into a little bit of that with the social determinants of health and what you're seeing as being a positive step with the patient navigation to provide resources for people?
Each of our clinics kind of tackles this differently. And the way that I do it with my patient navigator is when I do the chemo counseling, I do touch on them because they affect how I'm going to work with my job, right? If you don't have money for food and water and AC, you're not going to do well. So I do touch on those things right away so that I can get resources started with the patient navigator. So we're looking at things like financial stability. Like, is it hard to pay for things? Like, can you put it on a scale for us? If someone even indicates a little bit of unease, I'm like, okay, we're going to get the social worker involved because there are so many resources. Let's just start it right now. Let's not even get more worried about this. We also touch on transportation. Can you get to your appointments faithfully? If you cannot, we have other resources. Let's start it right away, right now. So the sooner we can catch things, the better. So those are the things that we're going to touch on.
A lot of times our patient navigators meet the patient before they even have a treatment plan. So where the nurse navigator comes in once the doctor decides, okay, this is the treatment plan that I believe is going to be best for you is going to start on such and such a day. And then the nurse navigator will come in and do the education about that treatment plan, what to expect. But the very day that the patient comes in and meets with the doctor and they find out what the results of that test was, what was the biopsy result, what's the plan going to be, that day, the patient navigator usually can meet with that patient and sit down with them and ask these questions. Is there anything we can do? Even before we start any treatment, what can we do to set you up for successful treatment? What can we do to help you be your best you through treatment?
It sounds like Honor Health and your guys' examples and the work that you guys do have a very strong, amazing, gold standard of patient care and support systems. But I can't imagine that is widespread everywhere, that everyone has access to this. And so I always say, I've never been through cancer before, so I don't even know what questions to ask. I remember, and I'm just going to say it, I didn't know the difference between a lumpectomy and a mastectomy because it was just not part of my vocabulary. I had no reason to need to know the difference in these terms. And so I wouldn't have known to ask for financial resources, financial support, transportation services, etc. So what advice do you have to the patient who is listening and wants to explore this with their care team? Like, do they just ask, like, what resources do you have? Is there a social worker I could be linked up with? Like, how would you recommend someone, asking and advocating for themselves to get access to something like this?
I think it has to be something that you're considering just as seriously as you are your oncologist, right? Like if you are looking around for an oncologist and you're getting second opinions, I think it has to be one of your very first questions is who is supporting you to support me? Like what is the list and what are their qualifications? What are they going to do? I think that has to be just one of those very first conversations that you're having. And it should be weighed just as heavily based on how good your oncologist is, because, you have to treat someone as a whole person and not just for this one little bit. So having those resources is huge. And a lot of people can meet those needs, but facilities that are attached to larger hospitals, kind of like we are going to have a lot more resources. Not saying other small ones can't, but that is something to keep in mind when you're looking around for an oncologist.
I think it's also important for the audience to know that after a cancer diagnosis and after meeting with their nurse navigator or the patient navigator, that is a long-term care and a personalized care that can be provided from the nurse navigator or the patient navigator, because it doesn't end after you have surgery. There's other things that you have to become familiar with, as Colleen mentioned, getting to know the new you, getting to know that new person that now has been affected by different things, whether that be now your early hot flashes because now you're on menopause because of the different mastectomy or hysterectomy, or the hormonal treatment, and also how those hormonal treatments are affecting you, and kind of getting to know and educate yourself on what is normal during this process, because sometimes that's very scary. And if we don't understand why or how or what's going on with our bodies, then that could be, either it could be very depressing for someone who is not familiar, or could be very hindering on a positive recovery. Because for me, I can say that when I noticed, for example, like my arms were hurting or something after the surgery, I would go and find about information about lymphedema specialists. And so I would go and research that and provide that to my oncologist. I would go and talk about, do you have anybody that you can recommend for physical therapy? Most of the times they would say, oh, no, I don't have anybody. Okay, let me go ahead and look for someone, bring you those resources so that you can share them with your patients. So that's how I became involved, in terms of, if I know that this is not who I was, there has to be a solution for this.
No, I have to laugh about the hot flashes, though. I remember I was at work having a terrible hot flash in a meeting with my boss and some colleagues. And like someone was joking. I was like, oh, it's tough getting old and going through menopause. And I was like, oh, no, it's just cancer. Like,
yes.
I was straight up like, I'm not getting old. Like, don't tell me
Love
that.
I know. And you know what was surprising for me, Laura? That is not just like the first year after your surgery. I mean, it's been almost 4 years, and I'm still getting hot flashes.
Yeah.
So.
And that's why some of my best friends to this day are those in our breast cancer community, because I could be having a great conversation with you and I just start sweating bullets and you don't even bat an eyelash. You're like, yep, I get it. No problem. Like, we just get it. So I think that level of community is just wonderful. So Colleen and Amanda, from a nurse navigation perspective, is there any topics that we haven't covered tonight?
I guess one thing I tell my patients is you really can't have a side effect small enough to not call me. Like, I would rather deal with something when it's a little fire that I can easily squash and we just stop it right there, versus if you call me and it's at a house fire point, I'm gonna be like, well, I'm sorry, you gotta go to the ER. Like, you need to call me and tell me these things so I can help you track this. So I want to know what's going on with you. Like, that's my sole purpose. So some people will be like, I feel like I'm just annoying you. And I'm like, no, you are not annoying me. What would annoy me is if you call me and I have to call 911 for you.
Your listeners, our listeners today, to know that there is always hope. That every day can be a good day, even if it's not a great day. It can be a good life, even if you have moments that are not great. Navigation can be such a blessing. To find an oncologist who has a navigator, a navigation team, to help you walk through that storm. There's no way around it. You have to go through it. You have to treat it. We know what happens if we don't treat cancer. We have to treat. There is hope on the other side of treatment. And having a navigation team to take your hand and help you walk through those darkest times, and then be there with you when you celebrate the beauty of ringing that bell when you're done with treatment. There is always hope. Things may change, like Lourdes, we were talking about that. Laura, for your second act and everything that you're doing, things may change. Your priorities may change. But one of the things that resonates so much with me in my role in oncology is the beauty of the oncology patient. Those people who have been diagnosed with breast cancer face something that changes their priorities and their outlook. It's no longer about, well, what am I going to buy from Kohl's tomorrow? It's about, how am I best going to protect myself so that I can best protect my loved ones, and walk through this so that I can be the best me for myself and for those around me. And the people who walk through an oncology clinic are the nicest people. Every once in a while, you may find some one-off, right? Somebody's really upset, right? I have never found it that it's not about fear. If there's someone who is angry or frustrated, it has always come down to fear. And navigation is wonderful because, like Amanda and I, if we are talking with a patient, like Amanda said, it's a very intimate discussion. Our teachings go on for about an hour each teaching. We get to know our patients and they share with us. And when they can rely on having that safe place to fall and to be built back up again, then the anger disappears, because anger always covers fear.
Well said. Lourdes, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and sharing your personal experience, not only working with these amazing, incredible nurse navigators at Honor Health, but your experience being diagnosed with breast cancer. So thanks for being here tonight. And Colleen and Amanda, thank you for opening up your world, because I think a lot of times too, it's like going behind the curtain. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know the rich resources that our oncologist team has. Who is going to be supporting you in order to support me as the patient?
Love that. That's such a great quote.
You're going to see that all over social media when this gets released. So.
There it is, Laura.
Not copyrighted yet.
No, amazing. No, but this has been so educational, and I hope this is one of many conversations. I can see this becoming like a series or something that we talk more about around, navigating the healthcare system, right? Like navigating nurse navigation, et cetera. And so being able to have the patient experience like we did tonight, along with the expert experience that you guys are providing, I really appreciate it. And thank you for taking the time. And thank you, everyone, for listening to our show. I would like to acknowledge that all of the information on our podcast are from personal experiences and are not a substitute for professional medical advice. You should always contact your medical care team. If you are looking for specific topics or would like to be a guest on our show, please feel free to reach out. My email is laura@survivingbreastcancer.org. Our show is made possible by our nonprofit, survivingbreastcancer.org, and by our incredible donors like yourself. You can hop on over to survivingbreastcancer.org to sign up for our mailing list, make a donation, and explore the 400+ programs we offer each year at survivingbreastcancer.org/events. Until next time, keep on thriving.